Hello, my name is Kayla, and I work for BLDD Architects, and I've been helping the New Berlin School District through our community engagement efforts that'll help us find a plan that'll help improve the New Berlin Junior and Senior High School. Our fourth community engagement session was held in person on Saturday, February 19th. With happy bellies full of mellow cream donuts and plenty of warm coffee, we discussed the final two scenarios and what they could look like for our district. So a brief overlook on all of these sessions we've held. These sessions have been open towards any New Berlin School District residents. These sessions are set up to have an informational presentation that leads us into workshops and activities led by the community members present. These workshops and activities have been where we got our answers and directions towards where our scenarios design should go. These sessions were focused on a facility plan towards improving the educational spaces at the junior and senior high, but we also had discussions towards campus improvements after we got our junior and senior high up to par with our elementary school. We have strived to document everything, and if you'd like to learn more on any subject we go over, please reach out to us. Our website shows some of the initial work performed by the task force and will continually update after every community engagement session, allowing you to watch our recordings and see the responses from the community activities from that session. If you have questions, please feel free to email us or give the district office a call. So we're going to start this presentation by understanding where this all began. Our process began on a bit of a sad note with the 2020 referendum for a new junior and senior high school failing. Since then, the district has made some changes in leadership, including a new superintendent, Jill Larson. From there, we formed a community-led task force in early 2021 to evaluate our needs both for our facility and for our community. Some core issues were brought to light. First off, the community wants to see improvements to the junior and senior high school, but struggles to support an increase in tax rates for any project that is too large. This pushed us to make sure that our designs were as efficient as possible so we can provide the correct program spaces without adding extra costs to extra spaces. We have also continued to build trust, relationships, and our communication efforts within our community. With these beginning points, a completely transparent process was used with the help of our community-led Building Pretzel Potential Task Force. This process began nearly a year ago in March of 2021. It began with a series of initial assessments to the existing facility so we could collect data for our task force to review, allowing us to know where we are now so we could start discussing where we wanted to go. The task force did a lot of work up front, including review of these assessments, creation of the first round of scenarios, and keeping us on track with communication towards the rest of the community. These task force meetings began in the summer of 2021 and continue on in between some of our engagement sessions. Overall, we've had 4 community engagement sessions, but we've also included a lot of community outreach efforts in between. That included a community survey at the very beginning, along with student engagement and faculty engagement, as they have the greatest input onto how their facility works in day-to-day operations. With all of this knowledge, we started with 24 scenarios that ranged from do-nothing scenarios to major remodel scenarios to rebuilding a high school to completely rebuilding everything. With those scenarios, we continue to review them and improve their design to this day to make sure it works for the New Berlin School District. With that being said, we will still have plenty more work to come even after the community picks their final scenario. You'll hear further explanation on this as I review the scenarios in the end of this presentation. So with all of those assessments, meetings, and engagement sessions, what did we learn? So first off, a fairly reasonable statement for any community around here is that our community wants to make the right decision. But looking into this deeper, we realize the right decisions sits in between 2 major concerns, which is cost concerns and facility concerns. First off, under facility concerns, status quo is not acceptable. As a reminder, status quo looks at improving what we have already, ranging from finishes to windows to mechanical systems, but does not rearrange spaces for educational improvement, meaning our students and faculty will continue to struggle in this facility due to the layout or missing spaces. Many teachers at our school have a lot of curriculum and programs that they would love to provide to our students, but our building inhibits this either due to size of space, lack of space, or even something as simple as furniture that cannot be moved around or reconfigured for various work activities. A fairly easy way to tell how much the learning environment is lacking is taking a look at the elementary building built around 2011 and then comparing it to our junior and senior high. With all of that being said, there is one space at the junior and senior high that is still very sentimental to many of us, which is our pretzel dome that holds the competition gym. This gym has been a staple in our community for the past 50 years. However, with that, we had some community members say that while they would love to keep the dome, they want to make sure that improvements to our overall learning environment is our top priority. Later in this presentation, you will see two scenarios, one keeping the dome and one focused on starting anew. Moving on to cost concerns. One additional reason why status quo is not acceptable is due to the upkeep of the building. Currently, there's a lot of money going towards upkeeping a building that ranges in age from 1919 to 1970, and it's forecasted to continue to need more costs to keeping this building up and going. This, along with inflation slowly creeping up, gives us a lot of urgency towards finding a solution this year. Todd, our K-12 expert at BLDD, has helped us shed some light on this at our in-person meeting. And while it is forecasted for inflation to steadily go up, we're still in a good position right now for a project because of the reasonable lending rates that we've seen recently. However, we don't see that lasting on into the future. And our last but definitely not least concern is how a tax rate change could burden many of our community members. So that was a brief look at the past year's worth of work, all of which is on the website. Now I'd like to dive into the community engagement number 2 and number 3, and also some of our feedback that we've received in between community engagement number 3 and number 4. These past weeks, we've had two main discussions around financing and construction disruption. First off, we will review our scenarios towards our borrowing limits and discuss any funding towards a long-range plan. Then we will discuss construction disruption and what that means for a remodel and addition project. First off, we originally dwindled our 24 scenarios down to 4 scenarios at community engagement number 2. The first scenario being status quo, the next two scenarios in red and orange being remodels and additions projects, and the final scenario looking at completely rebuilding the junior and senior high. Our remodel and additions projects, while budget friendly, continued to miss core functional needs, and many still had underlying future expenses, versus our complete replacement scenario that did provide all new educational spaces, but laid close to our max budget without raising tax rates. We received a lot of feedback on how they'd like to see these scenarios improved to better support our community. Over winter break, we specifically focused on our remodel and addition scenarios to see if we could improve the core educational spaces while also staying cheaper than the complete replacement scenario. This new remodel and addition scenario is called the replacement of the southern wing scenario. These are the two scenarios most focused on at our third community engagement session. In this chart, you can see that our max borrowing limit the district could have without raising tax rates is roughly at $36 million. Both our complete replacement scenario and replacement of the southern wing scenario fit below this limit. On this screen, the yellow bar is showing the range of our max borrowing limits without tax rate increases based on variables for sales tax, EAV growth, and length of repayment. So just to reiterate some of this information, we can realize a project up to $36 million without a tax rate change. making both scenarios shown in this presentation a possibility. So it's exciting news. We have two scenarios that fit within our budget and improve our learning environment immensely. But what about additional facilities improvements for our districts as a whole? There are a handful of routes we've discussed that we would like to take towards these improvements, and we're happy to say there's one form of revenue in particular that will continue to be a steady form of funding each year, which is the county sales tax. If you noticed, the sales tax is already slotted to make a healthy dent towards our junior and senior high facility, but that's actually 80% of the sales tax funding. Legally, 20% cannot be bonded towards that project. So that 20% will help us realize approximately $150,000 of additional annual funding that can be applied to facility improvements. With that being said, we have some great experts in the subject of project funding, so if my brief overview is not cutting it for you, please feel free to reach out to us to learn more. Moving on to construction disruption. So what you'll see later in this presentation is a remodel and additions project where we save the youngest portion of the building, allowing us some extra cash towards building some more square footage for spaces, while still keeping a very nice price tag overall. Even with our cheaper price tag, you'll see that we're able to greatly improve our functional performance. All of this is amazing news, but there is one major concern that comes with this scenario and any scenario that involves a remodel and additions project, which is construction disruption. On the screen is a recent remodel and additions project we had for an elementary school. The project ranged from spring of 2019 to fall of 2020 and required 5 highly detailed phasing plans to make sure school could take place throughout those months. These phases slightly extended our timeline for construction as there were restrictions as to when we could access a portion of the building. In this project, we were able to give the school usable space and correct egress and circulation to make sure they could still function as a whole. What is not as easily controlled is disruption to the learning environment due to the noise of additions taking place right beside the building. Now with this, remodel and additions projects are fairly common among schools as they help with cost savings and allow us to keep the portions of the building that we care for. Many architects and leaders in construction industry have experience in these types of projects and continue to work hard to minimize disruptions to the point that many clients find construction as more of an annoyance than something that completely hinders their school's functionality during those months. With all of that being said, this is a subject that should be reviewed anytime we look at remodel and additions projects. And later in this presentation, I'll give you an idea on how it'll look for our specific scenario. So at community engagement session number 3, after we had discussions over financing and details towards the scenarios, we had community members vote for their first and second favorite scenarios. Overall, there were 2 clear winners, which was the complete replacement scenario and the replacement of the southern wing scenario. This process was a simple democracy where community members were given a blue sticker for their first choice and an orange sticker for their second choice to place on the pages. What you can't see on the screen is a couple of notes that came with these scenarios where community members said they would be happy to vote for this one or that one if only it had a few tweaks applied to that. A lot of these tweaks community members were asking for were fairly simple changes to the overall layout. Questions that were asked were things like, where are the classroom wings for the junior high versus high school? Or if we build additions near the dome, what should that look like? These questions that came up along with the discussions that took place continue to help towards finding the correct layout of space, and all of which is information I continue to collect to understand New Berlin's overall needs. However, we want to make sure that the community understands that this should not be why a community member did or didn't vote for a certain scenario at this point. What we want to first vote on are some key data points to the scenario, such as square footage, cost, and functional performance. Once we know these key numbers community members are happy with, we will have plenty of further design charrettes that we will continue to tweak to design the perfect layout of space for New Berlin. So in the next few slides, I'm going to focus on these key data points that we wanted the community to vote on. But you will also get a glimpse at some 3D massing models giving you an idea of how the space could be laid out. These 3D massing models are something we use at BLDD to make sure the program of spaces can work on site. However, these models are by no means a done deal in terms of design and layout of those spaces. They are solely to help with a little visualization while also keeping our discussions flowing. So, looking at these key data points at the complete replacement scenario. First off, we have 85,000 square feet of completely new core educational and support spaces. This list of spaces can be found in the next few slides. Our goal for this new construction is to make sure that it stays below our max budget for no tax rate increases. Our ultimate goal is to ensure every space in this building is flexible enough to be used for multiple portions of the school's program to make sure we're not building any more than we need to. This keeps us within budget without overbuilding, but also gives us lower operating costs overall since we're not spending money to upkeep that additional space. Overall, our functional performance is greatly improved for our existing facility. This square footage, first cost, operating cost, and functional performance gives us a cost-benefit ratio of 43.6. With that, there was one question that came up in our in-person meeting that I want to clarify. So first off, the capacity of both of this scenario and the next one you look at for these facilities allows for 525 students to use that scenario or that space. Our existing student population at the junior and senior high school is at 454 students, and this student population has been fairly flat in terms of growth overall. There is minimal data showing us that the student population will shrink in size, nor do we see it hitting unmanageable spurts of growth. So to make sure we're building for our students of today while planning for the future, this design is lean and mean, but allows each grade to grow in student population before we have to plan for additions. So taking a look at the two iterations we have for the complete replacement scenario, both of these 3D views have the same amount of spaces, and these spaces within both of these iterations are pushing themselves to be as highly flexible as possible, allowing us to optimally use the space throughout the day to keep from overbuilding for our student population. The only real difference here is that there is a one-story option versus a two-story option. A two-story option lessens our overall footprint on the site. It also allows us to play around with how we separate the junior-senior high spaces while also keeping them near each other for the staff that work for both the junior and senior high students, keeping travel distances down from classroom to classroom. But smaller districts can typically get away with a one-story design too, and minimize the hassle of dealing with stairs or elevators. If designed properly, it can be a decent design without the negative side effect of sprawling. Since New Berlin's campus is fairly reasonable in size, a one-story footprint shouldn't be too hard to obtain for us. Moving on to the replacement of the southern wing scenario. This scenario removes the oldest portion of the junior and senior high, which is the entire southern wing, that ranges in age from 1919 to 1962. 30,000 square feet of the existing 1970s addition remains and is heavily remodeled. This 1970s addition that remains includes the dome. Then 70,000 square feet of additions is applied to the 1970s addition. What you'll see in the next slide are some 3D views of how this 70,000 square feet of additions could be applied to the building. There is one main rule to the placement of these additions, and that is to miss the southern wing and to not cut it off from the southern wing to the 1970s addition during construction. This will allow the southern wing to stay up and operational until the new additions can be opened and used. meaning we can continue construction throughout the semesters without losing usable spaces for the students and staff. In general, everyday operations will not falter during construction. However, as I've mentioned, there will be some rerouting of egress and annoyances throughout the day, such as noise outside classroom windows. Now I'm going to the key data points for this scenario. With all of the hassle of a remodels and additions project, it does have some positives. Specifically, we can get a lot of square footage at a cheaper price, even with heavily remodeling the 1970s portion of the building. Of course, with that, more square footage means a slightly higher operating cost for a 30-year period. Our functional performance is great for this space as the additions are providing a completely new environment to house our core educational needs, along with repurposing existing spaces to make them actually useful for our needs. These costs, functional performance, and square footage gives us an overall cost-benefit ratio of 47.4. This is our highest ranking remodels and additions scenario. For these 3D images, these iterations for this scenario also have some spaces and some similar concepts overall. The existing circular area that housed the junior high classrooms would be remodeled into shared spaces. The natural flexibility of the layout of a media space makes use of any odd shape that this circular area can throw at us, making this area a properly functioning space versus the original classroom layout. Since this area is our hub for shared spaces, we are also having some additions in this area, including specialty classes that sit nearby. After this, the placement of the gym and main classrooms and a variety of other spaces for each of these designs vary a little bit, but they still hold the same spaces within. So this slide and the next slide is what we really focused on the most at our in-person meeting. This is a super exciting slide that shows us how far we've come in our design when comparing it to our existing building. Any space in red means it's not currently provided, or even if it is provided, it is not functioning properly. So then we checked out the main numbers that we wanted the community to focus on and vote on, which was first cost, operating costs. Those two add up to total life cycle cost over the 30-year period. Add that with square footage and functional performance, which gives us a cost-benefit ratio, the main number we like to focus on, which is the bang for our buck for each scenario. When looking at these numbers alone, the replacement of the southern wing scenario comes out as the winner. However, there is one thing this number isn't showing us, and that is the construction disruption that comes along with remodels and additions projects. Now, as I've already said, remodels and additions projects and their construction disruption is something fairly common among schools and is something that can be minimized and controlled. But this was still a very large discussion at our in-person meeting and really pushed these scenarios toe-to-toe with each other when it came down to voting. And with that, we got to the part of our meeting where we started diving into our work activities. First off, the community members were asked to pick their favorite scenario by placing a green sticker on a board. You can see the final results on our website. After that, we asked where we should start looking when it came to an overall long-range plan for our district. This overall plan can range from improvements to the facilities or the campus as a whole, from educational improvements to athletic improvements to improvements to transportation around the school. These were just a handful of ideas that the community could discuss and choose from, including their own ideas. And with that, the main presentation ended and we went into small group work for the rest of the meeting. You can find results to the work activities on our website. This was our final community engagement session, but we still have more work to do. You will be hearing from the team within the next few months prior to our election day on June 28th, 2022, where the community will officially cast their vote for the improvements towards the New Berlin Junior and Senior High School facility. Thank you for your time.